of bizarre.
All right, well, we're just going to have to deal with the Beverly Hillbilly next door, so. All right.
It's like
ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
I guess I'll come over here.
All right, well, does everybody have a raffle ticket? Okay, good. I think we're going to have a few drifters, but we're going to go with this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
This YouTube video is going to be very strange because of that audio. Okay. My name is Michael. This is Melinda. We run a web channel called RetroBlasting. For those of you who are already here, this is a quick recap. For those of you for those of you who haven't met us before, we're going to tell you who we are. This is our goofy logo. Do you like my crazy hair? We run a web channel. This is our year anniversary today. So thank you for having us. We run a web channel that makes fun of pop culture with videos like Silverhawks, partly metal, totally messed up. Thundercats are racist porno kitties. Star Wars, don't eat the yellow lightsaber. And Transformers, Ratchet chaps my iron hide. Today we're going to be talking about vampires and zombies, and specifically how Hollywood has handled that within the last few years, within the last decade and a half really, and how we got there. I'm just going to run through the basics because today Melinda is really the resident expert on vampires. I can't claim anything really beyond Nosferatu and a few Buffy episodes, but I wanted to set us up.
But he does have a really good background in film, so it kind of brings a different aspect to the table. Like when I rewatch a lot of the movies I love with him, I see him in a completely different way, which is always kind of cool.
Yeah, if I was to do this presentation for more than 20 minutes, you would start to hear the BS as I started to try it. Oh yeah, Underworld, yeah, Kate Beckinsale. What else am I going to say? But as far as the classics go, it goes without saying, horror has always been a genre that has fascinated the human mind. As we know, it's been in literature, it's been on cave walls. We like being scared, we like iconic creatures of the dark. We like those urban legends and mysteries. We love to be scared, and it comes all the way up to modern day. And I'm going to let Melinda really talk about the history of that, but I believe I kick it off with the first movie,
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, actually, today we're really talking about how did this become this? I don't see a lot of similarity, but okay. And we're also going to talk about how did this become this. Okay.
And it all really starts with Nosferatu, 1922, F.W. Murnau's classic, which if you haven't seen it, you haven't lived or died, depending on how you look at it. But what I think is fascinating about Nosferatu isn't so much the copyright that surrounded it, but it was just amazing marketing that they did at the time. That cemented vampires for us in cinema forever, because these marketers were like, you know what we should do? Let's tell everybody that this actor is a real vampire. And they'll believe it. Because in silent cinema, people were running out of the theater when they saw a train coming at the camera. They didn't even, it was a new medium. And so who was going to know? There were no real, it was almost like Barnum and Bailey tactics applied to film. And so, for years, people thought that this guy was a real vampire who lived in Romania somewhere, and they hired him to do this movie, and then he ran off into seclusion again when he was really just some German guy, and, he needed a job. This film is creepy to death, and what's great about it is, as you can see, the vampire is a monster. He's not somebody you can relate to. He's not somebody that you can kind of get behind and say, yeah, I'd have a beer with that guy. He's all right.
Or I get in a relationship with that guy.
Right, I get in a relationship with him. He sparkles, man. This guy is a creature, and he's not human. He's out to destroy you. And this really set the tone early on, but as we'll see, it rapidly started to change because this was a German movie, and I think America had different sensibilities.
Yeah, and this was actually an adaptation of Bram Stoker, which was... Okay, so this is actually an adaptation of Bram Stoker, but this is the very animalistic side, non-humanistic side of Bram Stoker, whereas Dracula, which is also based on the same basic concept is a very different type of Dracula. I mean, vampire, because, you know, he's not completely someone you'd want to get in a relationship with because he's evil and that sort of thing, but he definitely has the sensuality about him, and he's sort of the first one that has that appeal. And it grows over time, so you have, you know, the 60s and 70s with the Hammer films. They also just furthered that sensuality and sex appeal of the vampire and his way of, you know, drawing people in with his, you know. And then you have your comedic vampires, you know. There's nothing like Pee Wee Herman as a vampire. So, but yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. And that's why I had to include it. But, I mean, it started with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is up at the top. And then, you know, there are a number of these films. And they really kind of started getting bigger, especially into the 80s. You know, you have one of my all-time favorite movies, The Lost Boys, which is not completely over-the-top comedic like some of these, but it definitely has that aspect to it. But then you have the modern era, and yummy. But so they're very attractive, and they're very not scary, and they have a human quality to them, whereas we're completely over here now in terms of the vampires being something you can relate to, and they're trying to overcome this evil that's inside them, but they're capable of overcoming it. Like Spike, even while he was still a vampire in Buffy, he was able somehow to make moral choices, you know, not just based on I want to eat you, you know. And now we're talking about the same type of changes in zombie movies because they are becoming so big now. So your first zombie movies, you have White Zombie, which interestingly is also Bela Lugosi. And these first zombie films, the zombies were not undead creatures. They were voodoo tranced creatures. And so it's a slightly different take on the zombie idea, which moves to some of my favorite zombie movies, and that really took off with George Romero, obviously, as a lot of you I'm sure know, with Night of the Living Dead and the subsequent films that came after that. And the top, obviously, being Lucio Fulci's Zombie, which is, if you've never seen it, it's a pretty awesome older movie. And then we have also got comedic zombies. You know, you've got Return of the Living Dead and Shaun of the Dead, which a lot of people really enjoy. And the difference being that even in this film, with Return of the Living Dead, her boyfriend comes back, and he's trying, sort of like, okay, we're having a conversation with a zombie. This conversation went very differently because she gave in, and what did he try to do? Eat her brains. Whereas here, that's not really the case. I always like to point out that Freddy and Tina, very similar to Nightmare on Elm Street. Anyway. Okay, so now we're just going to look at statistics, and I normally probably wouldn't do statistics at a convention, but it's kind of interesting if you look at the releases per decade that use the word vampire. Now, this includes TV shows, this includes movies, so it's kind of all-encompassing. It's pulled off of IMDb. And so you can see that in the late 90s, it starts really getting much more popular. So the all is everything that is available, and feature films obviously is feature films. Non-episodes are like if you're watching a show that's not normally about vampires, but they include vampires in it. So
isn't this around the time that Buffy came out?
Buffy came out in '96, so you know you can kind of see that. And in my next slide, you'll see I've got it notated. Buffy comes out, actually '97, I'm sorry. And the Twilight book comes out in 2007, I think. Uh-huh. And then you've got the Twilight movie a couple years later. And again, this is all the releases per year that use the term vampire somewhere in their description. And this is a little even more interesting. You get a really good idea because the random episodes thing is like, okay, if you have a TV show that's about vampires or the supernatural, that's one thing. But if you're watching a soap opera and all of a sudden there's a vampire in it, that says more. If you've got a lot more of those coming into play, then vampires are really permeating the landscape in terms of what's on TV and what's in the movie theaters. And, you know, I guess my question today for all of you guys, because I'm assuming you're all into horror on some level, is, you know, vampires have evolved, zombies have evolved, and they're growing in popularity. So whether or not you like Twilight, you know, sorry about that. Whether or not you like Twilight, it has really spurred sort of a lot of new ideas into the film industry with vampires and zombies. So, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Do you like it? Do you not like it? And so, instead of me telling you what I like, I'd like to hear what you guys think about this trend. So.
Thank you so much for coming to our panel. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Until that came out and everybody had questions.
Right.
And I'm not so
right.
sure that it didn't inspire the name of My Little Pony, too. Twilight Sparkle. Which,
That's what I'm saying. We just crossed over into bronies. I'm sorry.
That does explain a lot.
Yeah.
I was getting back to the zombie thing that we were talking about, and I certainly don't feel this way. I'm actually a very warm, fuzzy person. Like, I had